This is what you want. This is what you get. This is what you get.
You have located GeekFest Rants, the entertainment podcast for genre geeks like you.
Shall we play a game?
Covering the world of vintage and current film and television since 2010.
Game over, man. It's game over.
Featuring in-depth conversations on sci-fi, horror, fantasy, comics, toys, and conventions.
So say we all. So say we all.
And now sit back, relax, and enjoy today's show.
Just tell me one thing, Burke. You're going out there to destroy them, right? Not to study, not to bring back, but to wipe them out.
When Aliens was first released at the cinema and on video, 17 minutes of action was cut from the running time. Now, these scenes never seen before have been reinserted, completing director James Cameron's vision and adding a whole new dimension to one of the classic movies of our time. This is Aliens, the special edition.
I ordered a whole fire.
These people are dead, Burke! Do you have any idea what you've done here?
Bad call, Ripley.
This time, with even more suspense. This time, with even more terror. This time, with even more action.
Get away from her, you bitch!
This time, it's Aliens, the special edition. This time, it's more.
Hi everybody, and welcome once again to GeekFest Rants. My name is Carlos Peron, and today we are going to be joined by Steve Folks, and we are talking about director's cuts or special editions. There are many movies, most of them I would imagine are slightly older, that we went through a period where either the studio or the director would encourage and actually release an alternate version of their theatrical film. Different conditions, sometimes that even happens without the directors knowing or wanting to participate, but most of the times it used to happen, with their encouragement and their participation. We went through a period, I remember, where they were coming pretty regularly and we were eagerly waiting for them, and it would be the type of thing that it would be talked about for years, and it's like, oh, do you know that there's a special edition, or there's a director's version, or they shot these extra scenes and they're in the process of restoring them or something like that? Well, that's something that used to happen more in the past. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through a number of the most memorable ones, and especially our favorite ones, that we remember, from our list of director's cuts or special editions. So let's get started.
What did I teach you?
You are the Duke of New York. You're a number one.
You will not laugh. You will not cry. You will learn by the numbers. I will teach you.
Can you dig it?
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
That spawn of Satan.
Oh, really?
The Force will be with you, always.
All right, I have once again joining me Steve. Say hi, Steve.
Hey, Carlos. Hey, everyone.
We are going to hit a topic that indirectly sometimes we might have hit it in the past in different shapes or forms, but not exclusively. And that is the topic of director's cuts or special editions or special cuts and, that kind of thing. For me, it's almost kind of like an older thing. In other words, these days, I'm not like jumping around looking for like director's cuts and that kind of thing. To me, it feels more like something that I used to do a lot in the mid-90s when I was in college. And one of the reasons is because when I was in college, I got introduced to Laserdiscs. And with Laserdiscs, it was the first time that we were able to purchase films in a different format. Not only were they letterboxed, that was something kind of new back then, that I remember most people, if you go to Blockbuster or something, people would say, I don't want the black bar on top and I want to see the full picture. And then you try to explain to them and then you just have to give up and walk away. It's like, forget it. I'm not going to get into this. Give them whatever they want. But I remember we purposely were looking for those letterbox things, because I remember a friend of mine, finally explained to me and showed me the difference between letterbox and pan and scan, and how for all these years watching these films at home, we were missing information. You were not seeing what was happening on the right and on the left, because of the television format. And through Laserdiscs, that's one of the great things I remember about it, was that not only were we getting a different aspect ratio, but a lot of these films were being marketed and exclusively made to be director's cuts or special editions. And I would say the granddaddy of all of them, for me, even though I collected quite a number of them, and we're going to talk about a number of them today, to me it was Aliens, the James Cameron version of Alien, basically. And that's a film that I remember I absolutely loved, completely loved that film. And when it must have been like 8 years later or more after the film came out that the Laserdisc was available. And all of a sudden there were more scenes. And there was the whole sequence before the attack where we get to meet Newt's parents, who are like prospectors, and they actually find the first egg, I guess, that gets attached to their face. And then later on, we get to see these drone kind of weapons that they set up in the compound to kind of start shooting at the creatures. That was completely cut out of the movie. And, do you really need those extra scenes? Probably not. The film on its own is pretty fast-paced, but when you love a movie so much, any little morsel they give you, it's like dessert. It's like, oh yeah, I'll take more. I'll take another slice of that pie. I don't care. It was fantastic. I mean, that's as far as I'm concerned in terms of my favorite overall special edition.
Yeah, well, it's funny you mentioned that it was something that you did more in the past. And for me, it's the opposite. It's something that I never paid attention to when I was like, yeah, whatever, just show me the movie. I never really appreciated the idea of this sort of like post market, the director's cuts and extended editions and all that, until sort of quasi recently, actually. And I remember seeing Star Wars, the special editions, when they were re-released in theaters and everything like that. But it wasn't really. It was way after that until I guess for you, it was your entry was Laserdisc. For me, my entry was more into like the DVD and and Blu-ray and everything. Oh yeah. When they first started coming out, and like you, one of the ones that struck me the most was Aliens. Was a sequel, sequel to Alien, and because it's good you mentioned about Newt's parents and everything, and the scene of like the automated turret, and like you said, that didn't have to be in it, sure, but it adds so much. And I'll give you one more, is the scene where Ripley comes on board the station, and she sees the photo of her daughter, and her daughter is like an old, and for whatever reason that stuck with me. That was I was like, okay, I see the validity. I don't know. First of all, I don't know why they took it out, and second of all, this scene really. It changed my perspective on Ripley as a character. Even I always know Ripley's badass. She can take shit from no one. But for whatever reason, that scene kind of stayed with me and really humanized her. So after that, I was like, okay, there's something to be said about some of these scenes that are cut out and or what the director really wanted to say, but was limited by time or budget or whatever. So yeah, so that one really kind of stuck out to me.
It's a little tricky sometimes because I remember at the same time as director's cuts or special editions were coming out, you also had the introduction, again, first through Laserdiscs, then through DVDs and so on, of outtakes or deleted scenes. And not always would a director take the time to incorporate those deleted scenes into the cut of the film, to even give you the option of watching an extended version of the film. Sometimes the directors or whoever is in charge would say, all right, that's going to delete it. That's on the deleted scene chapter. You guys want to watch it, you go over there and watch it. But there were times, and again, for some reason, I think it was more popular back then because I think the directors were also more involved in it in terms of them saying, yes, I also want to put together, a director's cut so people can watch that too. Or sometimes if the directors are important enough, the studio, I think, would say to them, hey, would you be interested in doing a director's cut for the DVD or for the Laserdisc? But again, it all depends on how important of a director you are. If you're a nobody, the studio doesn't really care and they don't want to spend any more money. They just want to pump out the film so you can buy it at home. But some directors, I guess back then they had enough clout. And, speaking of aliens, Alien would be my other one I remember that was also... Now, I don't remember exactly if it was considered a director's cut, but it did have... I think it was, because it did have extra scenes. It had the scene where Dallas is in the cocoon, which was never put in the final film. But now I'm doubting myself if that was a director's cut or an extra scene. But somebody like Ridley Scott, we can then also jump over to Blade Runner. Talk about a director's cut.
Many director's cuts. There's so many versions of that film. There's the special cut, the final cut, the extent. There's so many versions.
I know, and there's a guy that likes to tinker, and they let him do it because he's that important of a director. Now, again, I don't know if they would let him do it today. Today, I don't know if he has that much clout or there's enough interest for people, for that sort of thing. Something tells me kind of like the highbrow artsy film consumer market is just not there anymore. Again, maybe it's old man syndrome. Everything was better when I was young and you kids don't know anything, get off my lawn. I don't know if it's that I'm getting hit with, but it just seems to me like more people were looking for that specialty stuff back then and somebody was actually producing it. I don't know about now. Now it's like, I keep hearing the Snyder Cut. Yeah, I'll tell you what happens. If somebody puts out the Snyder Cut, nobody's going to buy it. They're going to complain about it, and then nobody's going to buy it because it's like it's not that important anymore, I think. But I'm glad at least we have some of these older ones. With Blade Runner, oh my God, you're right. It's a monster. And which one do you prefer? Do you have a preference?
Now, admittedly, I've only seen two cuts out of probably, I want to say the 5 that exist. I've only actually seen 2 cuts of it. I've seen the final cut. I've seen the director's cut, and so I've never seen the theatrical
really?
The actual theatrical release of it.
Wow, that's funny.
Yeah.
Wow.
And but from what I hear is the fact that it's very, very different from the final cut because I really like the final cut. I like the way from here like the narration. Harrison Ford's narration is sort of removed. There's a few extra scenes now added to sort of give some more concrete details to what's going on. And so I enjoyed the final cut a lot. The director's cut, it seemed like it was trying to, I guess he was more hands-on with it. So it was trying to be, it felt to me a bit more it felt a bit more artsy as opposed to the final cut, which seemed a bit more concrete, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. There was always this doubt, whether or not, Decker is a replicant or not. And I'm not going to tell you it's 100% there, but you go from like 50% to 75%, knowing whether he's one or not, because he doesn't, give it to you all the way, but he gives you a little more that you can then make those connections.
Right. To bring up with these extra special editions and everything is when they the idea of going back and sort of adding scenes, not only adding in scenes that you originally shot and put them into the movie, but then there's the idea of going in and we're not really filming new material, but sort of creating through either CGI or sort of like now that sort of blurs the line for okay, what is the intent? Is the intent here now just to sell more copies, or was that your original intention, but you just couldn't see it through because of budget or what have or time? And obviously I speak to I think the biggest one, the Star Wars movies, which the special editions are re-released. Did George really have all this in his mind that he wanted to do eventually, or was it just let's reintroduce Star Wars and make a whole bunch of new scenes out of nowhere?
It was a lot. I think it was a mishmash of everything. It was, okay, he has the clout and paying for a lot of it himself, and I'm sure 20th Century Fox was paying for a lot of it too. knowing that this isn't a brand new film now. This is a monster that you're going to re-release now and make more money on it. So I'm sure they were pretty. You didn't have to convince them that much, but at the same time, like you said, yeah, he was also thinking about coming back into the game, and this was going to be a little bit of a trial balloon of, can we get this thing done with new CGI effects that haven't been used before? Can it work? And as a result of it, yeah, it worked. It made enough money, and it allowed him to go and do the prequels, which, you can't just, it's for Lucas at least, it's very hard to say one or the other. And if you remember, around this time, I think, I don't know if it was right before or right afterwards, he was also allowed to go and do, I think, like a director's cut of THX 1138, where he also substituted a lot of special effects with modern special effects, which made it a lot better. Again, the movie's what it is, but all of a sudden it's like, wow, this looks so cool now, so much more modern. I don't know if that made any money, but again, he had that clout. He could do it. He could get it done. But it's different. It's a different scenario.
Right. And for myself, though, I'm always sort of like questioning, like, okay, well, because George has a habit of remaking something and then pretending the original didn't exist, because now I mean, it's true, because now the original theatrical 1977 theatrical release of Star Wars, you really can't find it, you can't, it's really very, very, very hard to watch now or to find, really, because he's replaced it so adamantly with the special editions. So it seems like he's sort of erasing what the original cut of the movie and replacing it with this new special edition. But does that sort of set a bad precedent, to say, like, okay, well, now these directors sort of have free reign to re-edit their work and completely erase the original take of what they, put out in the first place? Right.
This is different than a director's cut. This is a never-ending project, really. It's art that doesn't stop. It continues to, and that's a whole other, I guess it's a whole other philosophy. I don't even know. There's probably a name for it. I don't know. It's some kind of an art that just doesn't stop. It keeps continuing, and he likes that. He likes to continue to mess with. I mean, I'm sure he's done now, because he really can't really. He's not supposed to touch anything. He's retired. he sold it. So, but yeah. Now, Grant, on the other hand, I think it's also the product. Star Wars does give him that ability to be able to tinker with it, incessantly. And he did, and he continued to tinker with it. But the other thing is, it's really not a director's cut, like I mentioned before. It's
a special edition.
It's a special edition, but is it his original intent? But yeah, it is. You could say it's his original intent, even though he knew he wasn't going to get it, and he wasn't going to be able to film it, and he wasn't going to be able to do anything with it. But it's different than something like we mentioned earlier, like Aliens, where it was already shot. Everything was already done. It's just a matter of that something was removed, physically removed, and now they're putting it back. That's a whole other. I don't know, it's a whole other category, I think. And, similar to Star Wars, I would kind of throw Star Trek in the mix, because a couple of the original Star Trek films, when they were put out on DVD eventually, they did release director's cuts or special editions. The motion picture had one, I believe. Wrath of Khan had one. So, and, they kind of stopped at a certain point, because I think they ran out of money, or there just wasn't that much interest. Or I think by the time they got to number 5, they weren't going to let, because, I mean, Shatner wanted to really go all Lucas in terms of all these effects he was never able to do. He wanted to reshoot them all, and they were like, no, we're not doing that. But especially with the motion picture, they added so much more to it. I can't tell you it makes the film any better. It's still a pretty big, bloated, kind of slow film, but it is more of a traditional director's cut, I would suggest, than something like Star Wars.
Yeah, actually, now that you mention it, I'm not sure which version I've seen then of the original Star Trek. I'm not sure if I've seen the extended or the theatrical. Actually, either way, I was never really blown away by the original.
What about, again, I'm a big fan of James Cameron. Terminator 2.
Oh yeah,
I know that with Terminator 2, absolutely love the film. And then again, when they put out the Laserdisc and they added the future scenes and all these other extra scenes that, again, it's like candy. It's like you have something that's already wonderful and they give you just more of it. And it's like I couldn't say no to any of that. I'm like, yeah, I'll take it. Let me have all these extra scenes because they're perfect. There's also the scene where you see Kyle Reese in a dream that was cut out of the film also. It's the only way you can see Michael Biehn in the sequel. And it is dangerous in a way because by giving you that extra, the end coda where everything's fine in the world, Sarah Connor is older and her son is older and the grandkids are, everybody's older, everybody's fine. It kind of screws up the continuity of everything that comes afterwards. Who could have predicted, the franchise potential of this thing, which was a monster. But it felt really good to get that kind of stuff. With a movie like that. Yeah,
and the whole Sarah nightmare scene was pretty. That was a great addition to it. Yeah. And I think you also get some extra stuff with I always love Miles. The character of Miles in Terminator 2. He's one of my favorites. So you get like an extra scene with him and his wife. So I don't know why. I always had just like fondness for the character of Miles in Terminator 2. But you bring up a good point in the fact that sometimes adding some of this stuff, especially, this only really happens to like the bigger name franchises, but when you add like scenes, to a movie where later on it might contradict something, in another movie or in another medium, it sort of opens up, a sort of, slippery slope there. Because in Star Wars, it'd be like, you taking out a scene of Star Wars. So like, it's technically are the deleted scenes technically still canon? How is that, viewed upon? So
no, it's hard. It's very hard. I'll tell you another one that's, again, in that classical era of the 70s, Close Encounters.
Yeah.
Now, here's a movie that's really bizarre in terms of, okay, the movie is made. It's in the theaters. It's very successful. And then they realize, we want to re-release the movie, but we want to do something better for the audience. So they beg Spielberg to come and help us recut the movie, and we'll add some stuff to it. That's like the compromise they had to make, is if you want me to come and help you, put a special version, a special edition, you're also going to have to reshoot certain things that were not shot the first time. Which is a little bit of a Lucas move in a way, if you think about it. Kind of like a little bit, he's adding more content. So now you have that entire Richard Dreyfuss walking into the ship in his red suit and looking at everything that's inside, which you never got to see in the original film. And that's like the big bonus that you got. There's plenty of other little snippets here that were added. There's one shot, and I always talk about this shot when I talk about Close Encounters, which I think it's one of these shots that was added for the special edition. And it's a shot of Richard Dreyfuss's truck at night driving through like a field. But the moonlight is enough to kind of light the night. You can see and all of a sudden you see a gigantic shadow following his car of this weird round shape. And then you're like, oh crap, that's what that is. It's my favorite shot of the whole film. And it's so subtle. It's completely quiet because it's at night. And it's so scary and weird that but it's a special edition. It's the director's cut special edition scene. So yeah, that's another one they were able to do. And the funny thing is that back when we were dealing with Laserdiscs was that some Laserdiscs had the entire film, as a separate track. So you could watch one version of the film beginning to end or the director's cut beginning to end. But some discs, like Close Encounters, you would have to program the film, and you have to tell it chapter 1, chapter 4, chapter 18, chapter 25, and the earlier. Now, again, this is all ancient history. You're not going to understand what I'm talking about. The earlier laser discs, they were kind of slow. So what would happen is whenever a chapter would change, a program chapter, not an entire chapter, you're watching a movie from beginning to end, but if you programmed like to go from chapter to chapter, you would see a scene, then everything would turn blue for like 2 seconds, and then the other scene would start. There was like a pause. There was like a delay between scenes. So I remember once I had a whole bunch of people at home, and we were going to watch the special edition of Close Encounters, and it was almost like a drinking game because every couple of seconds, everything would turn blue because the scenes were changing. So it was like watching, blue, watching, blue. It was like, and sometimes like the change would be like a line or two lines. So it would only last like 2 seconds, and then you get blue screen again, and then you're back to the other scene. It was kind of insane trying to watch it that way. You don't get that anymore.
It's funny. I don't think I've ever used a Laserdisc before. I don't think I've ever. I don't think even. I'm trying to think. I don't think my parents ever had one. So I'm assuming that that Laserdiscs were probably the first real medium that these extended editions and special editions and everything could have been easier, because I can't imagine VHS it being too. I mean, that would have had to have like a double. You would have had to have like, you know, a 2-pack of like a VHS or something.
No, yeah, it would have to be huge. And if you remember with VHS, you know, you have the 120s, the T120 VHS, and then after that you have like the T130s, and I think T180s were the biggest you could squeeze into a cassette. But the problem was always the same. The more tape you put on the cassette, the thinner the tape is, so they would snap a lot easier the more tape you try to cram in there. Right. But that was the whole point of Laserdiscs, was the fact that it's a higher. It wasn't exactly digital. It wasn't exactly completely digital. There were digital elements on the disc, but when you transferred it, you know, when you're viewing it on an analog television set, you would lose some of that digitalness, if you will. Similar to like you're listening to a CD back in the 80s, but the output of the CD player is going through your stereo, so it's not completely all digital like it is now.
It's not really end-to-end digital.
Right. So the picture quality was better. The size, the amount of information you can squeeze into the discs. Now, keep in mind, the discs were different speeds, different sizes, so that you could cram so much information on one. And certain players, the laser would read the top of the disc like a record player, and then it would go to the bottom and read the bottom of the disc. The type that I had was the cheaper kind that I had when the disc was over. Like after an hour of playing a movie, you would have to flip the disc and then continue. Like it or not, you had to do that. And that got crazy after a while, because if you had a movie that was more than 2 hours long, you would have to flip the disc once and then grab a second disc to continue. And there was some kind of weird stuff going on where certain discs you could spend a little more money and they could cram more information, or they would cram less information, and you can do freeze frames on them, or you couldn't do freeze. It was almost like VHS. Remember the flying digital heads and all that stuff, or you can pause and it would be a perfect still, but in the older ones you pause and the image would be like shaking.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that. It was the beginning of that technology. And I remember at one point, a friend of mine, it's like, guys, I have a combo laser DVD player. We're like, oh my God, laser DVD.
Hair blown back.
It was, and this was, again, this was it was all in the 90s, and it was kind of fast, because once the DVDs arrived, forget it. The lasers died on the spot, because the DVDs could hold so much more data.
Yeah.
Even though there's so much more.
Yeah. And that's why, even growing up, like, I think we had a VHS player, and we must have like just skipped over the Laserdisc. I guess it never really caught on.
Yeah, it was a niche market. It was hard to. The biggest problem with Laserdiscs was that they didn't have rental stores like they do with a Blockbuster or a Hollywood Video, whatever. I only knew one rental place, and unless you lived in Manhattan, where you could find like the film snobs somewhere and get that kind of thing. It was a very, very niche market. The players were expensive, and it was just, and the discs. I mean, the special edition Aliens, for example, I think it was like $150, and they came in these thick boxes, and a lot of them had extra material inside, pamphlets. And some of them were gorgeous, the way they packaged them. I sold a lot of mine, but I specifically kept, even though I don't even have a player anymore, I specifically kept some of the bigger ones with the gigantic box sets. Like, for example, the Star Wars Special Edition one came with a book inside, like a making of Star Wars book. It's ridiculous how big that package was. They just don't do that anymore. It's insane. You can't do it.
Yeah, I was gonna say that from what I hear from Laserdisc, it seems more of like an enthusiast type. It was more marketed toward not marketed toward them, but they're the ones who sort of adopted it more than movie enthusiasts and everything.
It was expensive. Like I said, it was expensive. It was rare, and it was very hard to find unless you knew where to go.
Right, and that would we'll have to cut you off. Yeah, that would make sense as to how these extended editions and director's cuts were put on Laserdisc first, because the market for them was more movie enthusiasts. So yeah, that
exactly
makes sense.
Now the other one I want to throw at you is Dune. And not so much. Now, the funny thing about Dune is that it's really not a director's cut. And what I'm talking about is the film was released in the movie theater the way it was, David Lynch. But then I think it was the Sci-Fi Channel was going to air it, and they wanted to air it in a longer format because I guess they want, obviously, just like a lot of channels, they want to be able to pack more commercials into it. And they were able to get a special cut where they added a lot more to it. I can't really tell you. First of all, Lynch had nothing to do with it. He refused to even participate in any of it. This was the studio. I guess I don't know who cut the film, who made this cut of it. I don't know if it's an Alan Smithy kind of deal where they don't want to give credit or the person doesn't want to take credit. But Dune being a very difficult subject as far as the film goes to kind of follow, I think that the extended version of it is a little better. I actually enjoyed better because it clarifies things a little bit better. I'm yet to read the book, which we were just talking about it. So I'm sure the book blows it away no matter what.
Yeah. I watched the original Dune, and I'm assuming it was the original cut. But it's not a short movie to begin with. So
no.
So the fact that they want to pad it even more was, easy. It could go longer. Like contrasting it with the book, I'm surprised, that there's probably not even a longer cut. And this goes back to what I was saying before, where these director cuts, it should be something to be said for the director had a certain amount of content he wants to put into the movie, but either he can't. Mm-hmm. He can't financially do it, or he can't financially swing it, or the fact that it's just just literally out of time, because you have to have a budget for time as well. So, but Dune itself was a pretty, again, from what I remember, it was a pretty decent length movie, but still, it just didn't really hit the mark for me. So, I'm curious to see now if as you say, is the extended cut of it was sort of fix a lot of the problems in the movie. I can't really say, but it just seemed like it was a bit too David Lynchy for my taste.
And remember, David Lynch at one point was approached to direct Return of the Jedi.
Oh, heaven forbid. Really, I can't see him because he's so unconventionally. I think he would have taken that movie in a very different direction.
Right. Whatever he makes, it's him. He cannot be a gun for hire. It's him. He puts himself in those films. Whatever's going on in his head, it's in those films. So he's the type of director who's best directing his own material.
Yeah, right.
Because now, do you have any films that I haven't mentioned?
Yeah. Well, one of the films I wanted to bring up is a smaller film called Donnie Darko.
Oh, yeah.
And this movie came out. I want to say maybe 2001, 2002, around that time. Yeah, and it's a very weird movie. It's if whoever hasn't seen it, it plays more into I don't want to say psychological thriller, but it's very, very mentally based movie. That makes any sense. And the theatrical edition, where it was originally released, which I originally saw it sort of left a lot of things up in the air. It sort of left a lot of the reasoning and the final decision of what actually happened up to the audience. So there's a lot of things that are sort of vague, nothing's really too concrete. And at the end of it, spoiler warning, when Donnie basically dies, everything is still very ambiguous. Nothing's really set in stone. And it has to deal with a lot of things like time travel, and it gets into a lot of sci-fi,
dimensional,
definitely a lot of altered dimensions,
multi-universe kind of weirdness.
And
very trippy, very psychedelic type of stuff.
And it's a very dark film. It's very quiet.
Oh yeah, I remember when the movie came out. I saw it on video. I'm pretty sure I saw it on video, but I remember the film had a website that you could dig through the website. It was a very weird website that would give you clues about stuff, and you would click on certain things. They were very weird. I forget what the term. I don't know if it was called viral back then, or if they applied it to that. But they were films that that you would go to their promotional website and you would get clues and unusual information. I remember Memento was one of those, and Donnie Darko was another one of those that had all this weird, strange clues about the lady with the mailbox and this and that and the other. Is like all kinds of weird stuff. I don't remember which version I saw. I don't know if I saw the original or the director. I think I might actually own the director's cut somewhere. I'm going to have to watch that.
Yeah, and what I love about the director's cut is the fact that, and I think if you listen to the commentary, the director, I think Richard Kelly, he mentions about the stuff they added in. In the movie, there's this book called The Philosophy of Time Travel. It's not a real book, but it's one of the characters in the movie wrote this book called The Philosophy of Time Travel. And in the director's cut, they sort of added like screenshots of different quotes from the fictional book, Philosophy of Time Travel, and they placed it in a way in the movie, like in different scenes in the movie, so it sort of explains as it's going. You'll see a scene of Donnie, and then with very, very creepy music too. They'll show the scene of the book, of the page from the book, detailing different things that are taking place, very prescient to the moment that's going on. So it sort of moves away from the fact that this is more of like a psychological thriller into more sci-fi and sort of multi-dimensional time travel.
Because it almost feels like a horror film at some points, and it's not really a horror film.
Yeah,
like you said, it's more sci-fi.
It's a weird genre, but what I like is the fact that the original cut is definitely more psychological thriller. Not sure what's very trippy psychedelic. But the director's cut, they leaned more into the sci-fi and multi-dimensional sort of aspect of it. So he states that in the commentary, which I thought was pretty cool.
I remember also, after seeing the film, it was one of these directors that I never heard of before, and I'm like thinking, wow, this guy's going to be like the next Lucas or the next James Cameron because he's so out there. And I was really, really disappointed in terms of what happened to him afterwards. I know he did Southland Tales, I think it was. And I was like, oh, man, I really didn't like it that much. And it's like, I kind of haven't heard from him. Like, what has he done after that?
Oh, I don't know. After Donnie Darko, he seemed to have dropped off. He did, he did Southland Tales. He did The Box. I never even heard of it. Domino. He wrote S. Darko, which is the sequel to so not a lot at all. The Goodbye Place. Unfortunately
that happens sometimes. They just kind of disappear. Let me throw another one at you that I forgot about. Apocalypse Now. Francis Ford Coppola, he's been able to get his hands on tweaking that film and taking a lot of the deleted scenes and also adding, more of this stuff into not doing it from scratch, just adding more to it. And again, this is a film that's already pretty big to begin with, and adding more to it, I don't think it hurts it one bit. It's again, if you're really, really in love with a film, it's really hard to mess it up by adding a couple of more scenes here or there. I can't really imagine a scenario where it can kind of, damage it. I'm not talking about Star Wars special editions because that's not.
Get to that.
Yeah. Those are not, and we talked about them already a little bit, but they're not exactly director's cuts. They're like reinventing the film in a way, so it's a different animal altogether.
Yeah,
and a similar thing I also found, like Apocalypse Now, was Dances with Wolves. They put out a director's cut of the Kevin Costner film, with more explanations, especially what was happening to him before he actually goes out to the West, what was happening to him as a soldier during the Civil War. Again, a very popular film at the time, and I was pretty happy with all those little extra things that they were able to add.
It's funny with Apocalypse Now. I didn't know a lot of extensive re-edits were done. So again, it's one of those movies where I've seen one version of it, so I'm not sure which version I've actually seen.
Well, the director's cut, the extended one, has a lot. There are these scenes where there's this plantation, this French plantation out in the jungle, and it's supposed to be, they kind of refer to it as ghosts because it's these families of French, Europeans living in Vietnam for like hundreds of years, and they're kind of oblivious to the war because they've been living out there so long. Yeah. But everybody knows they're all going to die soon because the war is there. And that whole thing was originally removed from the film, and they threw it back in for a lot of this stuff, for the special.
Then that's probably the version I've seen because I saw it on TV, and that's I'm sure that's probably because I do remember that, so I think that was probably the version I did see. But and Dances with Wolves, I've never actually seen I've never actually seen myself.
You have any other ones?
There's been one that was actually pretty. There's some movies where like you said, if you don't get the director's cut, or any extended edition, it's not really gonna make or break the movie. But for me, the movie Kingdom of Heaven is one of the movies where I feel the director's cut really adds, I guess it's more of an extended version. It really adds.
Isn't it Ridley Scott?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So we're back to Scott.
Back to Ridley Scott again. But it really adds something to the movies. A lot of the scenes that were taken out and so it's already a very long movie. So I can understand why some scenes had to be cut because the movie itself was already long. But there's a few scenes. I remember seeing it in theaters when it first came out, and I didn't really like it that much. I was like, I just didn't really have it just felt sort of very random. It didn't feel like very cohesive to me. And so it wasn't until a few years ago when I got the DVD of it and it had the extra director's cut on it, where I went back and watched it. And I was like, oh, okay. Some of these scenes that they took out were actually pretty, to me, coming from audience viewer, it seemed to me pretty, important stuff that they left out. And there's a lot of scenes with the main character and his father, and a lot of his motivations to how he got to, be who he was later on. And from that, it was lost in the original cut of the movie. So there is something to be said, I think, about director's cuts and extended editions that they're not just there for fluff or to make money. Some of them are actually some of these scenes should have been kept into the original cut of the movie, but a lot of times I guess studios are a bit scared to release such a long movie, and it probably makes less money in the theater. So
I'll throw a couple of quickie ones here. Going back to the 80s, I would say The Abyss. The Abyss, another James Cameron film that later, with the Laserdisc, they gave you this whole new additional ending to it, where you get to see all this world of these creatures, and then in the beginning, how you get to see a little more of the submarine stuff, and then you see like the tidal wave that's coming, that's going to destroy everyone, and how everything is stopped. And I'm not a big fan of that movie, and again, it was somewhat disappointing after seeing Aliens that he followed up with The Abyss, but it's like grand scale filmmaking, the amount of money and work that went into it. And yeah, I would say the director's cut gives it a little more. It explains it a little more. It gives you a little more insight on what these alien creatures are.
Well, that's hilarious because I feel the exact opposite, actually. And I think it's because I grew up with The Abyss and I love that movie so much. I would honestly say that movie may... I gotta think about this. I gotta think about what I say, but it may rival Aliens 2 to me. I love, I guess because I grew up with it. And I remember how I had some great memories of me and my sister watching it. But I saw I guess it's extended edition. I don't know if it's like a director's cut, but I saw the extra scenes added to it, and I didn't really like it. I didn't like that. To me, it went too far. It seemed like part of the fun of the movie is like you don't really see the aliens. It's sort of like this removed sort of. Not like signs where you never ever see them, but I like the fact that they weren't so in your face and it wasn't like explained and wrapped up in a nice little bow and everything at the end.
I had such high expectations for this film, but I'm coming from seeing the Terminator, and it's like, holy crap, this director is the next biggest thing in the world, followed by Aliens, which is like. He is the best thing it's never going to get any better than this. And then he does this, which is like, oh man. And I remember I actually saw it at Radio City Music Hall in Manhattan. They had some kind of big, it wasn't a premiere, but it was some kind of important, because I don't know how I got into that, but it was some kind of special screening or something. And I was just so disappointed. I couldn't believe
it's
it.
Probably all the hype.
Then,
like all the hype.
I know. I don't know what happened to me. I see. Aliens is to me is such a special film. It's like a perfect film, and I wanted more. I wanted more of that, and I didn't get that. Granted, this was followed by Terminator 2, which we talked about earlier, which was, oh my God, he's back to his peak of perfection. And I think after that we got True Lies, which I was like, okay, I get it, man. Okay. And that was kind of like the end, you know. I know Titanic was huge. I can appreciate Titanic. I could appreciate Avatar. Yes, I could. But to me, Aliens was it. That's it. That's as far as you go. But the other one I wanted to mention, because I kind of threw the Snyder cut at you earlier on, is Watchmen. Watchmen has its own director's cut that I finally got to watch not too long ago, and it doesn't really help me much, but it's like, yeah, it's more of the same, just more. It's just more of it. Okay, I'll take it. You know, he's a big fan of director's cuts, I guess, because a lot of his films.
Yeah, apparently, a lot of them are. I'm assuming he like gets. I'm not sure if it's the studio that tells him, not to go, like, ease up the gas, Snyder. But then, he has it already in the back of his mind. Maybe he wants to add in more scenes, but
even the last DC couple of films that he made, they released a director's cuts, versions.
And the thing about Watchmen is that I've only seen the director. I've never seen the original. Yeah, I've never seen the original theatrical release. So to me, it's all like director's cut. But isn't Batman vs Superman is Snyder as well, right?
Yep.
So now I know that had a very not controversial, but it had a very sort of big following more for the director's cut, or I think they call it the Ultimate Edition instead of director's cut, but
something like that.
But I know, like, the original theatrical release of Batman vs Superman is not well looked. It's not really well liked by many, but they say that the Ultimate cut by Snyder fixed, I guess, a lot of the issues that people had in Batman vs Superman, and the fact that first of all, it added I think a good 20 minutes to the movie, and the fact that it explained a lot of things that were sort of very ambiguous into Batman vs Superman, which a lot of people had problems with. So again, so some of these director's cuts, they really are. They go a long way in actually trying to repair some of the things that were left out, or fan reactions to it. They come back later, years down the road, and say, we heard the fan reaction to it. Let's put in some of these scenes to see if it can address some of the problems.
The final one I'm going to mention, because we touched upon Batman vs Superman, Superman 2. The Richard Donner cut. If you're going back to the previous age of superheroes, the Superman 2 film was always something that was kind of plagued by controversy, because Richard Donner, I believe, got fired like halfway through the film, and they gave the film to another director to finish. Well, back in, I think it was 2006, he was able to kind of return and recut the film with a lot of footage that they didn't use for that original cut. So he was able to kind of recut the film in his own, under his own image of what he wanted the film to look like. And that's one that I would definitely say it's definitely kind of important to see how different a film could be when directors switch hands, basically, who's actually in control of the movie, to see if you can kind of tell the difference between the style of one director and the style of the other director, because that kind of stuff happens sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. Especially recently, it seems like it's becoming more and more noticeable, where, one director goes out. Can you sort of spot the difference, between, the styles? Like one film that apparently, did have a lot of behind the scenes was Star Wars Rogue One, but the movie came out so well done. You can't really notice if there's a sort of shift in tone to me.
Well, that's a movie that unfortunately it's going to take years for us to really, really know the behind the scenes nitty gritty of how things happened. We know that there's a lot of rewrites, a lot of reshoots, and the possibility of different directors unofficially doing some stuff in there that right now I'm pretty sure Disney and Lucasfilm, they just don't want to talk about at this point.
But
because the film was so good, because the film was so good, it kind of negates all those issues. That's the tricky part, that you usually don't get that lucky. Usually when you have so much chaos behind the scenes, the end product is horrible, but here they lucked out.
Yep, yeah, really.
Looking into the future or even the present, again, maybe it's because of my age, but I don't really see the importance of director's cuts this day and age. They just felt more important back then, and maybe it's because of my particular mindset. I was so tuned into films and digging into, wanting more from a film, and now the films are coming fast and furious, and you don't even have time to breathe because the next film comes along, that I think maybe I kind of lose interest, or I lose focus on something that I might really like that well, because there's another one just right around the corner. Back then, now granted, back then wasn't the 80s or the 70s where you got this film once and then you had to wait like 2 years to see it again, or something. Now they just come so fast that I think I don't know. I think I'm losing focus.
Yeah, I think you're right, but I don't think they're going to really go away. I think the fact that, because the medium of film is turning more digital instead of having actual physical copies, I think that's another big reason why it sort of feels like the director's cuts and special editions aren't really, sort of in focus anymore. But I don't know. I still feel like a lot of people, especially like you mentioned, the whole like Zack Snyder cut of Justice League, there's been such a brouhaha around that. To me, it feels like they're still very much in focus, because if one film comes along, it's like, poorly received, I feel like there's always like this constant, now, okay, well, we didn't like that version of the film, so reshoot it and give us, another version of it. So I feel like that's going to be like some sort of, I don't even agree with it a lot of the time, but I feel like that's like sort of like a trend that's coming now, where fans who don't like a certain cut or a certain version of something are going to get so demanding, basically, that they're going to, sort of force the studio's hands into recutting or reshooting some things and giving it out like that.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but again, I do remember a period where it was more important that, as a matter of fact, some of these films, not only would they go to video, yes, as a director's cut, but sometimes they would even release them in the movie theater. I think with Blade Runner, the final cut, I saw it in the movie theater in Manhattan, I remember. Certain films, like The Exorcist, which is, I actually did a piece on it recently. There was a director's cut that was aired in the theater. They were like special events that they would first show it to you in the theater, and then they would release it, for the home audience. That's what I kind of don't see anymore. I don't see people making a big deal about it. I don't see a hoopla, surrounding a release. It's kind of like, it's here, it's there, boom, next. I would imagine, I think really Blade Runner probably was the last time I remember seeing a director's cut going to the movies.
I think the streaming media service too is sort of playing into, I think the whole like Netflix mentality of, bam, 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 give us the entire series, drop it all at once, move on to the next one. I think that plays into it as well.
Yeah. Well, if along the way we happen to run into something special, we'll save it and we'll eventually talk about it. But I think those are pretty much the big ones that I could remember, as far as I can go that far back.
Yeah, and I think those are probably the ones that we touched on were probably my favorite cuts of the different films.
Great. Well, thank you, Steve, once again for joining me on these weird topics that we keep coming up with.
A never-ending topic list. Thanks for having me, and I really enjoyed this.
You got it.
All right, take care.
All right, I hope you guys enjoyed today's show. I'd like to thank Steve, as usual, for joining me and contributing so much to this episode. Really surprised at how many individual films we can both come up with. And like I mentioned during the actual chat that we had, is that I don't see this happening these days anymore, or as frequent as it used to. Again, it could be because of my personal interests, and I was younger and I was more into it and I was more in tune, to these things existing and actually looking for them. I think nowadays, most of the material you do find ends up being deleted scenes, bonus material on a disc and that sort of thing. I don't think people will go to the trouble of really, re-editing a film, finishing some shots, redoing special effects and that kind of thing. You would have to have some really, really major Hollywood player involved in something like that. But on the other hand, you never know. There's still that Snyder cut out there that people still kind of talk about. So you never know, what could pop up in the near future. So thanks, guys, for listening, and we will see you here soon at GeekFest Rants. Bye-bye, everybody.
Get on the heart of the 45th Street Conway and see what the hell they could be testing up there.
This is the motion picture that astounded us, that challenged us, that dazzled us. The motion picture that reminded us we are not alone. This is the road that took us to the outer limits of a brilliant filmmaker's imagination. The road over 100 million people have taken and will want to take again. The road millions of others will take for the first time. But now the road will take us all even farther. Coming this summer to theaters everywhere, a special edition of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Director Steven Spielberg has filmed additional scenes designed to expand the total experience of the original motion picture. Now Richard Dreyfuss as Roy Neary will share with audiences all over the world the experience of being inside. When we saw Close Encounters of the Third Kind for the first time, we wanted more. Now there is more.
If you would like to subscribe to our show, send us messages, or see video links to some of the topics we talked about today, please visit our homepage at geekfestrants.com or our YouTube channel, Facebook page, or iTunes at GeekFest Rants.
I don't know what we're yelling about!
GeekFest Rants is produced by Carlos Peron, copyright 2019.
This broadcast is part of the IC Robots Radio Network. Visit icrobots.com for this and many other nerd/nostalgia related podcasts. You won't be sorry for long.